I'm gonna go ahead and get the recording started. So, all right, guys, welcome back for our very last meeting with Maribeth. I'm standing in for Denise just to get the recording and everything. She's on a travel day on her way back from Canada. So anyways, I'm super excited to hear the last segment of your training, Maribeth. It's been really good so far, and I'm a bit sad that I feel like we're just kind of getting into it and everything, all these great like little worksheets and a lot of things to think about. So we're super excited to hear where you have to go today.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki. I appreciate it. You guys, this has been so much fun just to get to spend this time with you and talk about really leadership, which I think is like, you hear it a lot these days, but that word, but really digging into it, I think is rare. So I just want to applaud you guys for hanging in there and for spending the time really thinking about yourself and your leadership. I think sometimes in a business like this, we do get so focused on our team and on recruiting that we forget that personal development piece. And we can't do that and have longevity. We can't do that and keep growing, So thank you guys for staying with me. So last week we talked about vision. We had this week 3 worksheet. Hopefully you guys had a chance to take a look at. And a lot of this, you guys, it's interesting as I was putting together the worksheets, like, I think in my mind, I would love for it to be like these simple, like, check a box, yes or no, like that stuff would be really cool. But these topics have required a lot of digging, and if you're really spending the time, I know it takes some time and it takes some tough, like, decision making when you're really thinking about what does your vision look like, And so this week I asked you guys to write out a vision for yourself, maybe even for your family, for your team, and really kind of hone in on that stuff, which you guys, especially being a part of Denise's team, you guys get a lot about vision. You guys may have already done this and it might have just needed a little bit of tweaking. But we also talked about taking action toward becoming a more visionary leader and telling your teams, your vision, and being willing to express that and talk about what it is that you want and what you see happening for them. And then also painting that picture, that vision for the future with them in your team times, whether that's through being in an event together and having those moments where you go around and talk about the people that are part of your team, or the recognition pieces that we talked about that are part of just kind of rewarding and reminding people how they're a part of that vision and how you're moving forward together. So we talked about a ton of that stuff, and I know you guys had the worksheet. Anybody want to share anything that they implemented this past week, or something maybe they discovered about themselves they didn't know before?
So I liked what you said. I hate to not nobody to share, so I'm just going to share, but I don't know. After what you said, I started to try to reflect on, because I feel like I'm really good at like I talked about before, is I'm really good at casting my own vision. I just assume everybody's got one, and it's to promote. And I still feel like that, but I did a thing about, I know Ashley Mayfield talks a lot about being debt free, and I kind of need. I was debt free for 8 years with Dave Ramsey doing envelopes and all this stuff, and so I know how to do that. And so anyway, and I haven't been debt free this whole year, and I have a car to pay off and a credit card now, and so I posted in our team page about no matter where we are, whether we are a new mom or just in college or whatever, I feel like our goal is always to be debt free. No matter what where you are, I can't buy, and what got me thinking is I want to buy a brand new Jeep before my 40th birthday with cash. And I'm like, well, I can't do that if I'm sitting over here owing $20,000 on this other stuff. And I thought, so no matter what our goals or dreams, debt free, not having any debt, not owing anybody any money is always there. And so I'm setting up something where in our page where I know now, my husband got me my number, is 19,626.02. And I'm going to comment and post about that and be loud about I'm saving this or whatever. And hopefully people will get on with that. And I do feel like my creator gives me more money when I'm being a good steward too. And so I'm kind of running with that as well. And so I don't know, you just got me thinking about that. And it's yeah, we do all need something to raw, like almost like Braveheart, where they're like riding through, like, oh, we got this. And so what is more perfect than just like paying stuff off and creating a savings and, being good stewards with our money. So
love it.
I'm kind of copying Ashley Mayfield, but it worked for her.
Okay.
It's where I'm at in my life anyway, so why not?
Yeah, that's perfect. I love it. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? All right, guys. Well, we will dive into today. And so this is our last week together, like Nikki mentioned. When we started kind of this journey, I shared that my heart is to help you take your leadership and then obviously then your team's leadership to another level. This is what Denise and I talked about before this even really came about, is really wanting to give you guys stuff where you can take your personal team and your leadership and like customize it, and grow within your culture, within your vision, within who you guys are as a team and who you are as a leader. So, and again, I mentioned this in the beginning, but growing in leadership isn't just for you. This is for the people that are watching you. It's for the little ones watching you. It's for your family, your team. Everybody benefits when the leader gets better. Everybody gets better. And so that's what this is about. And also, when you practice leadership and then you're called upon in moments to use it, you're ready, right? And today I want to specifically talk about those moments where you're called in and they're crucial moments. They're tough moments. They're like defining moments. They're like those moments when you're watching like a war movie. Have you guys ever seen this? And like, there's this like cocky guy that's like all, trained up and ready to go. And then like the rubber meets the road and they're in this like battle moment and they either rise to the occasion or they freak out and they're not really ready. You know what I'm saying? Like there's those moments in life. And so, I'm hoping that you guys have already gained some things. And I know you guys have shared some stuff that we've talked about. And even sometimes like it's something we talk about that spurs you to think about something else, right? It's like that rabbit trail you go down, but preparing you for the tough stuff of leadership. And so to close today, I want to talk to you guys about the really super light, happy topic of failure. Failure in leadership. And I want to share just some handles with you and some things with you guys. 3 things really about failure. Number 1 is failure doesn't have to be a bad word. Failure doesn't have to be a bad word. When you avoid, you guys, taking risks, you avoid failure, right? And also any chance of success. Let me say it a little bit of a different way. There is really no forward movement without risk, right? And likewise, without failure, we don't have success. And you guys, I feel like we could probably all talk about this topic to prospects or to brand new people that are coming in, and we could explain, hey, you got to risk big to win big. Like, we've all had this conversation before, but I think when you get to a higher level of leadership, I think for one, we can get comfortable. But I think for 2, it's like, okay, I've risked enough. I've done enough scary stuff and I don't want to do it again. I don't want to do more. I just want to teach other people what it looks like to take little risks and to get into the business for the first time, right? But the reality is we've got to continue to keep risking. We've got to continue to raise that bar for ourselves. So here's some ways that we risk, you guys. We do this all the time in leadership. We invest our time and our hearts into people. We invest our time and our hearts into people, and we pour into people with the risk, you guys, of being hurt. It's just like one of those love stories, where it's like you pour in and you invest and you give and you open your heart to somebody. And when you do that, you risk being hurt. But if you never do that, you don't know what those relationships could be, right? We bring people into our teams and our communities that maybe it could hurt us business-wise. Maybe that's a risk that we take, is bringing people in that we don't know quite yet, or we don't know what they're capable of. We put time and effort into people who may or may not ever really work their businesses, right? That's a risk that you take. I remember you guys spending hours and hours training people that would end up never doing diddly squat with their business. Have you guys ever done that? Is it just me? Just so much time, so much effort flying across the country to launch somebody and one person showing up at their party or no one showing up at their party. You guys, I've seen it all. I've done it all, but those are all risks that we make. Right. And so I want to talk to you guys about like even a couple scenarios just to like solidify this in your mind. Okay. Do you think it would be better for you to mentor and bring in 50 people in the business that all have some degree of success, you know, whether it's minimal success all the way to great success? Or do you think it's better for you to bring in 100 people and then only 50 end up having some degree of success? And I would argue, it's kind of rhetorical, but I would argue that it's better to bring in 100. Because here's what's happening, you guys. It's not all about the outcome of what you get at the end. It's also about you are developing yourself as a mentor. Do you want to be a mentor with twice as much experience, mentoring 100 people, leading 100 people in a great direction? Or do you want to be somebody who only does half of that amount? We want to be the best we can be, right? Likewise, if you're giving a try it presentation, or, you know, the old one team, one mission or party pad or any of the presentations that we've had, if you're doing a presentation like that in a room, would you rather do it, you know, in 2 rooms of 30 people, like huge events where people show up do it twice with, you know, total of 60 people in those rooms? Or would you rather do that presentation, you know, 10 times in rooms that maybe have like 3 to 5 people in them? Which one's going to make you a better presenter? You know, it's going to be the one where you practice more, where you are actually going down that path more times. You're learning through it. You guys, I know for me, even in the presentation, standpoint, there were so many times I would learn something about a presentation as I was in the middle of it. And I learned to tweak it on the fly based on who was in the room. I learned to tailor it to if I have one person I'm sitting across versus if I have 10. You know, but that experience did not come without practice. It didn't come without showing up at tons of people's houses who won a rap raffle to go do this party, and people didn't show up, or they might not show up, or like ring the doorbell and they don't answer. Like crazy failures I've seen in this business. I know you guys can identify with some of this, but I would not have gotten so much better at presenting than if I hadn't, you know, spent the time and invested the effort. Social media. Do you think you're going to be better and more influential on social media if you post, if you spend all year long creating and curating the most perfect post and image to get out there? Is that going to be better? Or is it better to take a risk by putting content out there before maybe it's perfect, by putting out pictures that, you know, maybe it's not a professional, maybe it's something, a selfie that you took or some, you know, it's obviously better for you to keep putting yourself out there, to keep risking by letting people in to see who you are, to find out what you're about, and to be willing to put that risk out there. I realized recently, I literally said to my husband, I'm like, I don't think I've failed enough. And he was like, what? I mean, he looked at me like I was crazy. And my husband's like, he's so patient, you guys, because I'm like a visionary. I always have a new idea. I'm always like, okay, what do we do now? And he's like very stable. He does not like change, but he's so gracious to like listen to all my ideas. So the day I went and told him like, I haven't failed enough, he's like, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? And it dawned on me, you guys, like it's been a long time since I had like a massive failure or something where I really felt like, like I shot for that really big, hard thing and missed it, you know? And I realized even though somebody might look at my life and think, okay, she's risked a lot, in reality, I've been very calculated about the things I've done in so many areas of my life. You know, and you could look at me and you could say, like, I was a performance major in college. Like, that's pretty risky. Who does that? Most people don't do that. Or if they do, they end up changing because it's really hard to get a career in performance, right? Like, that could seem risky. It might seem risky that I got into ministry when I was 22 as a single female and moved across the country. Like, people might think it's risky that I joined a network marketing company with It Works back in the day. Those things might seem risky, but you guys, to me, they weren't. They were things that I'm like, I'm pretty sure I can do this. Can you guys identify with this where you're like, even when you started your It Works business, you might have been a little nervous, but there was a part of you that was like, I can do this. But when's the last time you did something where you're like, I don't know, but I'm going to sure try. I'm going to go for it and I'm going to risk and I want to tackle that, even though there's a chance that I might risk. or that I might fail. If I do that risk, there's a good chance that I could fail. But at the same time, you guys, you think about this and it's like, there's this path and it's risk. This path of riskiness is going to lead you to success, or it's going to lead you to failure. But if you don't go down the path, how are you ever going to know? J.K. Rowling says it's impossible to live without failing at something unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default. And I love that quote. It was such a great reminder. Failure, you guys, should be our teacher, not our undertaker. This is another quote. Failure is delay, not defeat. It is a temporary detour, not a dead end. Failure is something we can avoid only by saying nothing, doing nothing, and being nothing. That's Dennis Waitley. And I want to talk about failure today, you guys, not because I'm thinking, you guys have been in the business a while, you've probably seen some failure, or, this is not necessarily the conversation about, are you stuck? This is not that conversation. This is that conversation where, hey, even if you have come in and all you've seen so far is success, you've got to risk more. You've got to risk failure. You've got to dream bigger. You've got to put that stuff out there for people to see. Okay, so number 2 point I want to make today is that failure points the way to success. And if we don't go through seasons, you guys, where sometimes it feels like all we do is fail, right? If we don't go through tough seasons like that, we're not always ready when God says go. We're not always ready when it's time to actually get to that finish line or ramp up to that goal. If we haven't been through some stuff, we might not be ready for that thing. You guys, we might not be ready with our hearts, with our, the longevity it's going to take, the resiliency it's going to take to lead in those spaces. So many times we imagine just the outcome without the work that it takes to get there, but also without the tough skin we've got to have once we get there, right? To lead a team and do big, scary things. How well you challenge is going to determine how you change. How well you challenge is going to determine how you change. If you can weather stuff well, if you can stick through stuff, and if you can become more and more resilient as a leader, that's going to allow you guys to do so much more in your businesses. Okay, so I just told you point 2 is failure points the way to success. How does failure point the way to success? Here's a couple ways it does that. Failure makes us stronger. It makes us stronger. We're able to face challenges better the next time around, right? This makes me think of that book, Go for No. You guys have probably all read it or heard about it, but just the concept that the more you get told no, the easier it becomes. And I meet people all the time that will say, I was so scared to reach out about this business. I was so scared somebody was going to tell me no, but then now I've gotten so many no's that I don't even care, right? That concept, failure makes us stronger. Failure clarifies our vision. It clarifies our vision. When we fail, we refine, we tweak, we change directions, even if just a little bit, when we face those challenges and when things don't go our way, right? We have to adjust the sails. And that's part of it. Failure clarifies that vision for us. It almost like puts those bumpers on it too, in some ways, right? On the side, so that we can have a real clear way to where we want to get to. Okay, and then failure helps us overcome the fear of failure. Failure helps us overcome the fear of failure. And really, you guys, the fear of failure is so many times worse than failure itself. The things we fear that we're not going to do, or what will people say if I don't get there, or how will I feel if I miss that mark again? All that stuff, you guys, the fear of that, the worry of that is worse than it actually happening. And so if you allow yourself to take some risks and to experience some failure, it's not going to be quite as scary as it would have otherwise been. Okay, and number 3, our team needs to see us fail. I talked about this a little bit last week when we talked about vision, but if your team doesn't see you fail and model what it looks like to pick yourself back up, they're not going to know how to do that. I think of this in context of raising children and, being in a marriage where I remember thinking, at some points in life, like, I hope my kids never see my husband and I argue. I hope they never have to experience that. And, you know, you hear horror stories of people who had parents that were screaming at each other and some of that stuff. And like, you don't want that. So do you want nothing? And what I've come to realize after having kids for, I guess, 12 years now, is that I want my kids to see some conflict. Not out of hand conflict, but I want them to see us disagree on stuff and have to work through tough stuff, because what that's doing is that's modeling for our kids how they're going to do that one day in relationships as well. We want them to see that, but it's also okay for my kids to see some failure, for kids to see some seasons where maybe things didn't go the way we wanted them to go and it wasn't successful. And how did we handle that? How did we move forward in that? And the same thing, you guys, is true of your teams. If you put out a goal and you set something out there and you say, you know, I'm going ambassador this month, and you don't make it, it's still better, I believe, that you told your team. I still think it's better that they get to walk through that with you. They get to be a part of that process. But then when you get to that end of the month, if you didn't make it to ambassador that month, they can also see, okay, how is she going to redirect those sales? How is she going to change and grow? And what does she do now that she didn't quite make it? Okay, that's a good thing. You know, parenting, it's like our kids, you know, I was thinking about how you get so exhausted when you have a tiny baby and you're like, I can't even get through the evening. You get this kid to bed, then they wake up during the night, they're crying again. You know, they keep getting up, and we keep getting up. Like, it's instinctive. And we all have our moments where we just think we're going to die and we can't do it, but we get up and up and up and up. And then they wake up in the morning and we're still there. We still show up. We keep doing it. We have that resiliency in parenting. It doesn't make it easy, but it's something that we all do and we're familiar with. That feeling of failure, this isn't working, but you keep pursuing. You keep pursuing, you keep going after it when it comes to kids. And we've got to do the same thing with our businesses and with the risks that we take in leadership. Here's another great quote for you guys. No human ever became interesting by not failing. The more you fail and recover and improve, the better you are as a person. Ever meet someone who's always had everything work out for them with zero struggle? They usually have the depth of a puddle, or they don't exist. And that's Chris Hardwick that said that. And the example that this quote made me think of was the Lego movie. Have you guys all seen that? Where Emmett is like, everything is awesome. He's super positive, which I'm a fan of that, of being positive, but part of his deal is he's never experienced anything. He's never risked anything outside the norm. And somebody who knew him that he'd been saying hi to over and over every day made a comment that was something to the effect of like, yeah, I know who that guy is, but I know nothing about him. Like, there's nothing distinct about him, you know? And we can find ourselves in that place if we don't take risks. And we can also find ourselves in that place with people if we aren't vulnerable and we're not sharing. Because some of it is taking the actual risks and working through the tough stuff. And some of it is taking the risk of letting people in who we are. And those are the things, you guys, that attract people to us. People will connect more with your weaknesses than with your strengths. Did you know that? And think about that in terms of social media, but also think about that in terms of conversation. You know, it's just absolutely huge, the difference it can make when we're vulnerable and we're real with people. So I want to be real with you guys today, and I want to share a little story here in closing. So this is not something I share about very often, and this is an intimate group today, so I am going to. I told you guys I got into ministry really young. I was 22 years old, and my first experience in ministry was like euphoria. It was like a honeymoon experience, if you will, in ministry. I went in and I got to work with an amazing husband and wife team. I got to see just their leadership unfold in such a beautiful way. I got to see what marriage looked like in such a perfect way from them. Like, just so many great things about that experience. And really, I came in and they like loved the things that I brought. I feel like I did no wrong in their eyes to a degree. They gave me total creative license to do whatever I wanted. I was writing original music and using it in the services every weekend. I could put any kind of art form in. I just had total freedom. And I loved it. And I was so young, you guys, but I remember at the time thinking like, I'm really experienced now. I have like 3 years under my belt. Like, I'm getting really good at this. And just, you don't realize until you're older how cocky you really were when you were young, And so I was in that position for about 4 years. I loved it. I had such a good experience. But there's that piece in me that's always like, what's next? What's more, wanting to grow. And I got a job offer from a church that was in Arizona. And this was an opportunity for me to go to a church that was only a year old, but it was it was like a plant of a church of 10,000 people. So huge opportunity for me going in, really cool, like cutting edge kind of church. I was so excited about it. My husband and I had gone out there and interviewed, and he was going to be entering into ministry too for the first time coming out of IT. And it was risky and it was scary to take this position. But I thought I knew exactly kind of what I was getting into. And I knew I was bringing this wealth of experience, right, that I had gained in my 4 years as an adult, really, in ministry. And so we headed out to this church and we got there, and I was going to be working with the church, with the pastor's wife. Her name was Cindy. And so I get out there, and she was going to be the worship director over me, and I was going to be the worship pastor. And so here I am. I go from this experience of having total creative license, where it was like we were very loved at this church, to being in a brand new place where I had to prove myself all over again. But not only that, it was like, here's the songs you're going to sing. Here's the words you're going to say. Like very scripted, very different style, totally different culture on the West Coast than in the South, coming from Atlanta to Phoenix, learning so many. It was just like total culture shock. But then I remember sitting down with Cindy, that pastor's wife. And, she said, hey, I want you to plan a service this weekend. So I planned a service, and I wrote down, like 6 songs that were in their library. I'm like, I think we could do these songs. I think this could be our process that we go through, and this is what the service would look like. And I remember her taking a red pen and marking out each and every song that I planned for that weekend. And I could tell in the beginning, she was like, no, they don't really like that. They don't like that. She got to the end and she started to feel a little bit bad. And she was like, I just, maybe we can try again. Like, this just isn't working. And you guys, talk about failure. Oh my gosh. In that moment, I felt like I'm no longer this experienced adult who's had this creative freedom. I'm this child who's being chastised, and a red pen is crossing out everything that I've created and everything that I have done here. And it was so hard, you guys. Honestly, it was one of the hardest seasons of my entire life. And I remembered thinking in that time, first of all, I want to quit. I want to give up. I hate this. This is not what I thought. But also I thought, but if I can get through this will be the hardest thing that I ever go through in my life. There's no way anything could ever be harder than this. Granted, that was before I had 4 kids and learned that life doesn't always get easier, right? It's just, there's challenges and there are things that happen. But it was really tough. And I tried to give that position up in just a couple weeks of being there, you guys. I sat down with the pastor and I'm like, I don't think I can do this. This is not what I expected. And he talked us into staying. And I remember my husband saying, honey, if we can just make it 5 years, if we can just make it 5 years, or until we really feel like God says, okay, you guys are released from this position. And so we kept plugging away, and it got better. Things got better. We learned a working relationship with myself and Cindy, and we settled in, and I learned, like, hey, Maribeth, guess what? You did not know everything coming in here. You are still learning, and you are brand new in this culture and in this church. But we weren't there, but probably 2 or 3 years. And we found out that Cindy had breast cancer. And so she got sick. And at first we thought that this was very manageable. And we went through a really tough process with her. She ended up, her cancer spread to her brain, to her lungs. And I had to continue to lead this team alongside her, respecting her, loving her through this process, but picking up the pieces as we went, and just trying. On a Sunday, we wouldn't know if she would be well enough to come and to lead the band and to play the keyboard or not. And so we had to have a backup plan, and we had to keep moving forward either way. We had to know that we could have a team together. And hang on, don't want to get too far off my notes here. Okay, so we continued to move forward, with our team and try to make this thing work. But eventually we lost her. We lost Cindy. And it was just a couple days after Easter. We thought she was going to be with us on Easter and play keyboards. We found out last minute that she wasn't. And 2 days later, she was gone. We didn't see it coming. We did not see it coming. Maybe we should have, but we were all hoping for healing and for a different outcome. And that is not what happened. God chose to take her. And you guys, honestly, it was such a gracious time. That God was so gracious to me to not throw me into that position, the leadership position, leading that team without preparing me, without humbling me, without letting me walk through something that was so difficult. So that when I got there, I was ready. I was ready to work with and for this woman's husband, who had worked with her for like 20 years and was also married to her, but be able to work for him, to be able to take over this team and shepherd them well, taking the good things I had learned from her, leaving the things I didn't like from what she brought, because we learn as much about leadership from people from the good things they do and from the bad things they do, right? We learn from both. But I was so thankful in the end that God had let me walk through that. The humbling experience of finding out that I wasn't quite as great as I thought that I was, but also what it looks like to walk with a team through tragedy and tough times and failure. And you guys, that laid the groundwork for what would eventually be the start of my It Works business. And I probably shared that part of my story with many of you, but I ended up pregnant with our third child soon after Cindy died. And I was on bed rest. I was stuck on bed rest for 5 weeks. First time in my life I couldn't go to church. And back then there was one online church, and it was called Life Church. Craig Groeschel. You guys have heard me talk about him because I consider him a mentor of mine. But almost 8 years ago now, I started listening to him every single week. And that was the beginning of God laying this groundwork, this personal development for me to then come across It Works again for the first time and take a risk on the business. You guys, all of this that I have just described to you, this failure, these tough seasons, the stuff that all these years later I still can't talk about without crying, are what prepared me for what God had. It's what laid all of that groundwork, you guys. It was what put me in a position of humility, but also openness to knowing that there can be more. There can be more in leadership. There has to be ways to push through stuff that seems impossible. And so, you guys, these seasons are so transformational that all of you walk through. And if we had all day, we could go around and each one of you guys could share your journey and the stuff you've walked through, the stuff that God's brought you through. And I have a tendency to think that we could all say we wouldn't be where we were without that stuff. The crappy stuff, the hard stuff, the loss of marriages, the loss of relationships, the sickness, the loss of children for some of us. We wouldn't be where we are had we not walked through that stuff. And I just believe, you guys, that God doesn't waste anything. He doesn't waste any of it. Okay? He's using it in your life. And if we don't take the risks, if we don't put ourselves out there and we're not willing to step into the moment when it's tough, to put the big goals out there and risk the failure and risk missing the mark, then we're missing out on so much more that He can do in us and through us. So let's thank God for those seasons of hardship, of failure, because of the growth, you guys, for the lessons learned. And though none of us want hardship, growth isn't usually possible without a degree of that, right? Ellen DeGeneres says, it's failure that gives you the proper perspective on success. And I know I'm so thankful for the depth that I have that I would not have if God had given me success after success after success. Or if in my It Works business, I had hit every goal, every landmark, everything I ever wanted to do, you guys, my life would look probably very different right now. But I also think, to a degree, I might not be the same person. I wouldn't be the same person. I wouldn't be able to identify with others who go through struggle. I wouldn't be able to walk team members through things that are tough had I never experienced anything tough on my own. So, to recap, we've got to risk big, invest in people, make tough calls as a leader. We've got to set huge goals, you guys, and we've got to be vulnerable and learning all along the way. So the 3 things we talked about today, there is no forward movement without risk. And likewise, without failure, there is no success. Stop spending so much of your life avoiding pain and instead take the risky steps to get to where you want to go. Do you really want progress in your life, in your business, in your relationships? You've got to learn to risk. Number 2, failure points the way to success. Failure makes us stronger, clarifies our vision, and helps us overcome the fear of failure. And then number 3, our team needs to see both our successes and our failures. And this takes a lot of humility, but they need to see both. All right, you guys, as Craig Groeschel says at the end of all his podcasts, people want to follow a leader who's always real more than they want to follow somebody who's always right. So let's be that for our teams. Let's be risk takers. Let's be people who are not afraid to share where we are on our journey and where we're headed. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for joining me for all of these sessions. It's been awesome to be able to just share my passions and my heart with you guys. And I will get that last worksheet over to you. Obviously, since we won't be meeting back together, I'd love any feedback or takeaways that you guys have. Please feel free to shoot me a message on Facebook or Instagram, and we can connect that way, or reach out to Denise as well and let us know how this has helped and what you've been able to use. We would love it. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm still reeling, so much to process, and thank you so much for your time and just for being vulnerable with us and just sharing your heart and helping us to just be better leaders, because I know that I, for one, can just relate. There's so many things just after such a long journey, a career with It Works, you do see all these valleys and these peaks, and it is sometimes hard to navigate because we don't have an example before us. Sometimes I think that it's hard to look at our business and look at how we need to be just developed as human beings in a leadership role when we don't have a predecessor, when all we see is social media and how it's so great and how everything's so perfect. And so the rawness of being real, I think it is so much more relatable. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys.
All right. I'll get the recording posted, and thanks again.
Bye guys.